I'm 82 years old, sitting here on the porch looking out at Lake Michigan with its gentle ripples under the late afternoon sun. I can't help but smile with a faint lingering sadness. When Susan stepped into my life, everything changed forever in a way I never anticipated. The solitude that I once considered my close companion used them in return. But in return, I gradually lost myself. It took me a full 4 long years to realize what truly matters. Now, at this age, I want to tell you my story. Not to complain or be bitter, but so you don't repeat the mistakes I made. Don't wait until your hair turns white as frost to have that realization. Have you ever wondered why people are so afraid of being alone? They act like living by yourself is a disease that needs urgent treatment. I used to think I was fine, even happy, with my quiet life. But then the pressure from my children, friends, and neighbors made me start doubting everything. They talked as if I was making a big mistake, and I, the fool, listened to them. Let me tell the story from the beginning so it's clear. My wife, Eleanor, passed away in 2008 from complications of heart disease that the doctors discovered too late. We had been together for 42 years. In just 2 short months from diagnosis to when she closed her eyes, everything fell apart. The days after that were true hell on earth. I wandered around the old house in the small town by the lake in Wisconsin like a soulless shadow. I'd open the kitchen cabinet and not remember what I was looking for. At night, I'd sit by the window, looking out at the dark lake, tears silently falling nonstop. Life seemed to have lost all meaning. My son David, who was already grown and had his own family, visited often but didn't know what to say to comfort me. I would just nod, force a smile, and sink back into silence. But then, like any man who had worked with his hands his whole life, I decided to fix myself. I was a retired mechanic who had specialized in repairing trucks and heavy machinery for 40 years. After retiring, I turned to a new passion to fill the void, crafting and repairing handmade fishing rods. I built a small workshop right by the lake behind the house. There was a sturdy oak workbench, neatly hung tool shelves, and natural light from large windows overlooking the sparkling water. That was where I found myself again. Every morning I'd wake up as the sun just peeked over the hills, brew a strong cup of black coffee with no sugar, and sit on the back porch for about 20 minutes breathing in the fresh air carrying the scent of the lake. After that, I'd go to the workshop and work until noon. I'd eat a simple sandwich with cold cuts and cheese, rest a bit, then continue. In the evenings, if the weather was nice, I'd often go out to the lake to fish alone, listening to the gentle waves lapping the shore and thinking about old memories. Nothing fancy, but for me, it was paradise. I felt truly at peace, not needing anyone beside me, not needing long conversations. Just me, the pinewood blanks, sturdy fishing line, sharp hooks, and the vast wide lake. No one understood that at first. My son David started to worry. He called more often, visited much more frequently. "Dad, I'm really worried about you living alone like this," he'd say on the phone, his voice full of concern. I'd laugh loudly and tell him, "Son, I like it this way. I'm not lonely. I have the workshop, the lake, and those fishing rods waiting to be finished." But he didn't believe me. He kept repeating that I needed someone for company, that living alone would make me age faster. I brushed it off, but inside I started to feel a little uneasy. Then came Thanksgiving in 2014, when the whole family gathered around the big dinner table. David looked at me over the roasted turkey, his face full of sadness. "Dad, you look so lonely. You should meet someone." My neighbor Earl, an old friend who lived 2 houses away, immediately chimed in. He slapped my shoulder hard and laughed heartily. "Robert, life is short. Don't live alone anymore. I'll introduce you to a nice woman." They talked as if I was seriously ill, as if those peaceful mornings in the workshop and the solo fishing trips were something to be avoided at all costs. I started listening to them. At first, just to put their minds at ease, so my son wouldn't worry anymore. I thought, maybe they were right. Maybe I was fooling myself into thinking I was happy. In January of the following year, I met Susan. She was 64, had been widowed for a few years, and used to be an elementary school teacher in the district. David introduced us. She was a friend of a colleague. We went for coffee at a small, nice place by the lake with a view of the water. She was very pleasant, smiled a lot, and asked about my hobbies sincerely. I told her about the workshop and my handmade fishing rods, and she listened attentively, her eyes lighting up as if it was the most interesting thing in the world. On the drive home, I felt a bit better. Maybe this was a good thing. Maybe David was right. From then on, everything happened naturally, like the lake water flowing. Morning coffee turned into cozy dinners. Dinners became weekend walks by the lake. Susan was warm. She told stories about her mischievous grandchildren, about her years teaching children, about the happy and sad memories of her life. I felt heard and cared for after so many years of being alone with myself. The first few months were truly wonderful, I have to admit. I thought I had regained some of the joy I lost when Eleanor passed. Everyone around me breathed a sigh of relief. David called more often, his voice full of excitement. "See, Dad, I told you so." Earl slapped my shoulder and laughed loudly. "See, didn't I tell you?" They made me feel like I had just won a big victory. But then small changes started to creep into my life quietly, without fanfare. Susan liked to talk in the early mornings. Not light conversation, but pouring out like a non-stop stream. While I was still sleepy with my coffee on the porch, she would already be talking about the news, about her sister's health in the neighboring state, about the neighbors next door arguing. I'm not someone who talks much before the sun is high in the sky. Eleanor understood that. She left me in complete silence. Susan didn't. Silence for her was a sign that something was wrong. She would worry and keep asking questions. She also started coming to the workshop more often. "I'm just watching how you do it," she'd say with a sweet smile. Then she'd stay and ask all kinds of questions. "What's this for? Are you sure it's safe? How long does it take to finish a fishing rod like that?" The questions weren't malicious, even kind, but they cut through my train of thought mercilessly. The peaceful rhythm of working in the workshop was completely broken. I started going to the workshop a little earlier, hoping to avoid the interruptions. But then Susan would wake up early too, bringing hot-baked goods and coffee, sitting right by the workbench and chatting softly. I wasn't angry with her. That's what made everything so much harder. Susan was a good person. She didn't do anything wrong. She was just being herself. Someone who liked to share, to connect, to fill every space with words. As for me, I had built a life where silence was as necessary as air to breathe. Gradually, I realized I was changing in a way I couldn't accept. I started fewer big projects. The complex fishing rods that required high concentration were postponed indefinitely. I shrank my space to fit her presence. The solo fishing trips at dawn also became rarer because she liked to sleep in and then wanted to go with me, even though she didn't like sitting quietly waiting for the fish to bite. Every morning when I woke up, instead of eagerly heading to the workshop like before, I started to feel an invisible weight on my chest. Not clear sadness, but a quiet, hard-to-describe emptiness. I quietly asked myself, since when had I stopped looking forward to those moments alone with the wood and the lake? Had it been over a year? I had stopped turning on the old radio in the workshop for fear she would ask about the song playing. I stopped going fishing at dawn because she liked to sleep in and then wanted to join me. Damn it, I thought to myself on sleepless nights. Why did I let people convince me that my quiet life wasn't enough? They said loneliness was the enemy, something that needed to be fixed immediately. And I, the fool, believed them. I started doubting my own happiness. That was the biggest mistake of my life. What do you think, my friends? Is love or friendship worth trading yourself for? Or should we listen to our own hearts more, even if that voice only whispers in the silence? I search my memories, trying to find the 72-year-old man who was once happy with his lakeside workshop and solo fishing trips. That man was gradually disappearing, and I knew that if I didn't do something, I would lose him forever. The pressure from those around me grew stronger. David called to praise me for making progress. Earl told funny stories about my new life to our mutual friends. I smiled weakly, nodded, but inside a storm was raging. I tried to keep the old rhythm, tried to smile more, tried to become the person everyone expected. But with each passing day, I felt more like a stranger to myself. The workshop was still there, the lake was still there, but the joy was quietly drifting away with the water. I remember one hot summer afternoon. Susan suggested we plant a few more vegetable beds in the small garden next to the workshop. She said so we would have something to do together. I agreed, not wanting to make her sad. But when we went out to the garden, she started talking non-stop about this and that. I bent down to pull weeds, my hands trembling, thinking to myself why everything had become so unpleasant. Before, the garden was a place of peace for me alone. Now it had become a place of noisy conversation. I tried to convince myself that this was a good thing, that change was necessary. But deep down, I knew I was losing something precious. That silence, it wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. It was me. And I was losing it day by day. The tension built up gradually, like dark clouds gathering before a storm. I started waking up a little later, just to have a few more minutes lying in bed thinking. Susan still woke up early, still went to the kitchen to make coffee and wait for me. She would ask and worry when she saw me silent. "Are you okay?" she'd say. I'd nod, force a smile, but in my head were 1,000 unanswered questions. Was I wrong to try to change? Were the people around me right when they said living alone wasn't normal? I'm telling you these things not to blame anyone. Susan never forced me. She was just being herself. As for me, I had chosen to listen to other people's voices instead of my own heart. That's when things started getting worse. I remember one evening, after dinner with David and his family, my son pulled me aside. "Dad, you look so much happier now," he said, his voice full of pride. I looked at him wanting to tell the truth, but in the end I just nodded. I didn't want to disappoint him. Earl would call every week, asking about my new girlfriend, and laughing loudly when I told a few funny stories. They made me feel like I was doing the right thing. But at night, lying alone in bed, I'd stare at the dark ceiling and wonder, why do I feel so heavy? Why is the workshop by the lake no longer something I look forward to? I tried to push those thoughts away, but they came back stronger. The tension kept building, like a rope tightening around my chest. I started avoiding long-term projects in the workshop, only doing small tasks so I wouldn't be interrupted. I reduced my solo fishing time, replacing it with walks along the lake shore with Susan. Everything seemed fine, but deep inside, I was slowly dying. Then one March morning, after nearly 3 years together, I woke up at 5 o'clock as usual. Susan was still sound asleep in the room. I made coffee and stood by the window looking at the workshop by the lake. And at that moment, for the first time, I realized I didn't want to step out there. Not because I was tired, not because I was sick, but because I knew that in just an hour she would wake up, come out, and start talking. Anything I started would be interrupted, so why start at all? I stood there, the coffee growing cold in my hand, and wondered when I had stopped wanting to go into my own workshop. I searched my memories. It had been over a year. I had stopped starting big projects, stopped having those quiet, peaceful moments without needing to explain. I had shrunk my life to fit someone else's presence. And right then I understood what I had lost. Not the mornings, not the workshop, not the lake, but the belief that my way of living was enough. For 4 years I had heard those gentle, kind words that I needed someone, that solitude wasn't enough, that my joy was just a cover for sadness. And I started believing it. 2 weeks later, I decided to end it, but that's for later. At that moment, I just stood there, cold coffee in hand, my mind in turmoil. The tension had reached its peak. I knew I had to face the biggest decision of my life, but before doing it, I needed to be sure. I needed to be sure I wasn't making a mistake again. I needed to be sure I wasn't making a mistake again. I sat there for hours, the coffee stone cold, my mind spinning with hundreds of unanswered questions. Susan was still sound asleep in the bedroom, her light snoring echoing down the hallway. I looked out at the workshop by the lake, the pine wood blanks still lying there waiting for me to finish them, the old spools of fishing line hanging on the wall. They seemed to be calling me back, but I hesitated. Damn it, Robert, what are you thinking? You're 80 years old and you're still letting other people dictate your life like this? I cursed myself silently, clenching my fists. For the past 4 years I had tried to become the version everyone expected. The cheerful man who smiled a lot, always ready to listen to long stories about grandchildren and current events. But now I realized I was living like a shadow of myself. No longer the old mechanic who loved crafting fishing rods. No longer the guy who sat fishing alone at dawn to let his soul be at peace. I had lost that, and I knew if I didn't stop right now, I would never get it back. I decided to talk to Susan that afternoon. Not with a big loud argument or any blame. I simply asked her to come out to the back porch, where we used to sit drinking tea and watching the gentle lake waves. The spring wind was chilly, carrying the familiar scent of the lake water. Susan, I need to talk to you about something, I began, my voice trembling a little. She looked at me, her eyes full of worry, hands gripping her teacup tightly. I told her everything without hiding. I said that I cared about her, that she was the best person I had met since Eleanor, but my life needed silence like air to breathe. I can't keep shrinking myself anymore. I've tried, but I'm gradually losing myself. It's not your fault. It's mine for listening to everyone else instead of my own heart. Susan cried. She asked what she had done wrong, her voice breaking like a child's. I hugged her, my own tears rolling down my cheeks. That was the hardest moment of my life, not because of physical pain, but because I knew I was hurting someone who didn't deserve it. But I also knew that if I didn't do it, I would regret it for the rest of my life. That decision cut through my heart like a knife, but at the same time it freed me from the invisible shackles I had bound myself with. Have you ever wondered if living alone can be a gift rather than a burden? It took me 4 years to understand that. And now at 82, I want you who are younger than me to think carefully before letting pressure from those around you push you onto the wrong path. After Susan left, the house became strangely quiet. There was no more soft laughter from the kitchen, no more light footsteps entering the workshop while I was concentrating. I stood up and walked straight to the workshop, placing my hands on the old sturdy oak workbench. I didn't do anything, just stood there for hours, breathing deeply and feeling the peace returning. That was when I knew I had made the right choice. Not because I hated her, but because I needed to find myself again. My son David called that very evening. His voice was full of disappointment, almost angry. "Dad, what are you doing? Susan is a good person. You're pushing everyone away." I sighed and explained everything again, but he didn't understand. He thought I was backing out, running away from happiness. Earl, my old neighbor, came by the next morning, his face red with frustration. "Robert, are you crazy? Life is short. Why are you choosing loneliness like this?" He slapped my shoulder hard, as if trying to wake me up. I just smiled sadly and shook my head. They couldn't see what I had lost. They only saw the surface, an old widower who needed someone beside him to be normal again. The days that followed were the hardest time. I woke up at 5 in the morning as before, brewed strong black coffee, and sat on the back porch looking at Lake Michigan with its ripples under the dawn light. But this time, no one interrupted. I went to the workshop and started again on the big fishing rod project that I had abandoned for over a year. My hands trembled at first, as if the skills had rusted. I cursed quietly when the line snapped, but gradually the old rhythm returned. At noon, I ate a simple sandwich, rested on the old chair, then continued working until late afternoon. No one asking questions, no one interrupting. I felt myself coming back to life day by day. There were moments when loneliness hit, I admit. Late at night, lying alone in the wide bed, I thought about Eleanor, about Susan, about the advice from my son and friends. But then I reminded myself, Robert, you're 80. 2 years old, you know what you need now. Don't let anyone convince you that quiet is a mistake. That was when I started keeping a journal, not some sentimental diary, but just short notes about the peaceful mornings, about the big fish I caught at dawn, about the joy of completing a handmade fishing rod without anyone bothering me. I want to share with you a lesson I learned the hard way. Never let the fear of dying alone control your decisions. I was afraid of that, I admit. After Eleanor passed in 2008, those long, lonely nights made me think I would go crazy. But then I realized that living the last years of my life without recognizing myself was truly horrible. I had been a mechanic for 40 years, fixing everything that was broken. I built my own workshop, made my own tools, repaired my old truck myself. That life taught me that people can fix themselves if they know when to stop. And I stopped. 2 years after breaking up with Susan, David started to understand more. He visited more often, this time without the pressure. "Dad, you look so much healthier," he said one autumn afternoon in 2019 while we were fishing by the lake. I smiled, nodded, and told him about my new projects. Earl still came by to visit, but he no longer judged. We just sat drinking beer, telling old stories, and laughing loudly about the mistakes of our youth. Life returned to its old rhythm, but now I treasured it more than ever. I no longer doubted myself. I knew my quiet way of living was enough. Now at 82, sitting on the porch looking out at Lake Michigan on this April afternoon this year, I feel so much younger. My hair is snow white, my back a little bent, but my spirit feels light in a strange way. The workshop is still running. Fishing rods are still being made and given to friends and to David's grandchildren. I have no regrets about the decision I made years ago. It was painful, it was difficult, but it saved me from living as a stranger in my own life. I want you, no matter your age, to stop and ask yourself, are you living for yourself or living to please others? Don't let kind advice from your children, friends, or neighbors turn you into a version of yourself you don't recognize. Love is wonderful, but only when it doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself. Solitude is sometimes the best friend. It gives you space to think, to create, to simply exist authentically. It took me 4 years to learn that lesson, and I don't want you to lose that much time like I did. I remember an old story my father once told me when I was a 15-year-old boy on the Wisconsin farm. He said, "Son, life is like a fishing rod. If you grip it too tight, the line will break. You have to know how to loosen up, to let it be free." Back then I laughed, thinking he was talking nonsense. Now I understand he was right. I had gripped too tightly when I tried to hold on to the relationship with Susan to please everyone, and the line was about to snap. Luckily, I let go in time. These mornings, I still wake up at 5, brew coffee, sit on the back porch for 20 minutes, then go to the workshop. No one interrupts, no one asks questions. I listen to the lake waves lapping, the birds singing, and I smile. That is enough, completely enough. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, my friends. For me, at least now, this is enough. What do you think about the final years of life that you are living? Are you preserving yourself or losing it day by day because of pressure from those around you? Think carefully, because time waits for no one. And if my story touches your heart, please comment below with your thoughts, like if you find it helpful, and subscribe so you don't miss other real stories.